Hello, everybody. Welcome. I am Andy Simon, and I am hosting this event along with Tom Mazzarelli on behalf of Seton Hall University. I want to just quickly note that this event and the entire series is being made possible by the Provost's office at Seton Hall University. Dr. Katia Passerini and her staff have provided a faculty development grant that have funded this event. So we're grateful to Seton Hall's Provost office and of course to Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis for providing her expertise. Welcome back to all of you who joined us, and I would say good evening to everybody, but I do know that there are participants on this presentation tonight from literally all around the world in different time zones. So I hope that you enjoy it wherever you're located tonight. Just also want to remind everybody who's still logging on what Burke just said, please take a look at your video and audio to make sure that they are turned off. It saves bandwidth and allows us to keep the focus on Dr. Joffe Ellis. So a couple of quick points. Dr. Joffe Ellis will be presenting. We will then have an opportunity to engage and invite someone in our audience to engage in a demonstration with her. And we will, if we have time, have Q&A at the end of tonight's presentation. I'd like to draw your attention to the chat. First off, if you have questions during the evening, please type your questions into the chat center. I will monitor them and do my best to present them should we have time. The other issue to keep in mind is that Dr. Mazzarelli has posted 3 different documents in the chat. You can scroll up if you don't see them immediately. These are documents related to all of the REBT presentations, and you're welcome to download them and keep them for yourself. And finally, at the end of the evening, Dr. Mazzarelli will post a link where you can click and get access to the documentation for documenting your own continuing education credits for participating in this event. So those are our announcements for tonight. So without any further delay, I want to introduce an internationally renowned expert on rational emotive behavior therapy. Her husband, Dr. Albert Ellis, is known for his enormous impact on the field of psychology and introducing us to the idea of rational emotive behavior therapy. And tonight's topic is REBT, problem issues encountered by therapists. And Debbie, please take it over.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And who do I want to thank in addition to all of you who are here today, tonight, or some of you may be watching a recording of this. So I want to thank Dr. Andy Simon and Dr. Tom Mazzarelli, who contribute tremendously to the field of psychology in a number of ways, and in addition to being professors at Seton Hall University. And since I've known them, they're great, not only colleagues, but friends, and so much in REBT's corner, as well as in mine, in my quest to spread REBT and keep it alive and share it with as many people as possible. So I'm deeply grateful to Dr. Andy and Dr. Tom, and also, as Andy or Dr. Simon mentioned, to Dr. Passerini, the Seton Hall Provost, and the people in her office, to Burke Loxley, who you heard at the beginning, the tech wonder whiz, who really allows this to be happening and recording and all, and his colleague Mike Supias, Lucy Vasquez, and Willie Yalacy, and Linda Carton, 3 people who do so much work behind the scenes as well. And again, to all of you, I'm aware that many of you are professionals in the therapy field. Many of you may be educators. I believe a good number of you are students. And from what I understand, a number of you are none of the above. I think we're all human beings, so we all have that in common. But I do want to say, for those of you who are not actively working professionally in the healing professions, that I hope and trust that you will find much of value in what I share tonight, even though the topic is problem issues encountered by therapists. So all are welcome, and hopefully each one of you will receive some benefit. The next thing I want to mention is, I'm speaking on Tuesday, March the 23rd, 2021. I say that for the benefit of people who might be watching a recording of this sometime in the future. And yesterday there was yet another tragic event here in the United States, in Colorado, another shooting, mass murder. So just want to acknowledge, may the souls of the departed people continue to inspire those who knew and loved them, and others of us. May the people who are grieving grieve tenderly and healthily. Part of life is that, in all probability, all of us at some point will, if we haven't already, lost someone or someones we love. And very importantly, hoping that lessons can be learned from this tragedy and put into practice to prevent future tragedies. You know, recently a book came out that I was a co-author with Dr. Stanley Krippner and Linda Rydell, and on suicide. And I contributed a few chapters and in various other places. And one of the things I wrote in relation to suicide is prevention is the cure. And I believe that applies in this tragic situation as well. And so when I say I hope that lessons are learned, I don't only mean in pragmatic ways, such as reevaluation of firearm regulations, but I very much mean on a broad scale to which each one of us as individuals can contribute. And that is educating people about mental health and emotions, and destigmatizing therapy and mental illness, and making the reaching out of help more accessible, making it easier to notice in people around us certain behaviors or tendencies that have alarm bells ringing, so that we may help a troubled person reach out for help. I believe that unless a person is severely disturbed in one way or another, they don't commit acts of violence such as that one. So one of the many things I love about REBT is that it's not just an effective, scientific, powerful, empowering, evidence-based psychotherapeutic approach, but it's also a way of life for those of us who elect to use it as such. And it reminds us that it's not events, even the atrocious ones, that create our emotional suffering or stability. It's the way we think. And as those of you who are familiar with REBT know by now, when we think in rational ways in response to mild or extremely difficult events, then we create emotional stability, and we can act as stable anchors and inspirations for others around us. So anyway, that's my pre-introduction to what I'll be talking about tonight. And tonight's topic, again, specifically problem issues encountered by therapists. The plan is, after this second introduction, I'll speak on the topic. As Dr. Simon mentioned, please, if there are areas you would like to discuss, you'd like to hear my opinion on, if you have questions, please send them in through the chat room. Is that what it's not the chat room? You know what I mean, yes. And then if there's a volunteer, I'd like to do a demonstration of REBT. If there isn't a volunteer, we have a videotape of a demonstration, a live demonstration that I did at Seton Hall before COVID, BC, yeah, before COVID. And then if there's time at the end of that, questions and answers. If we run out of time, then Dr. Simon and Dr. Mazzarelli said we'll hold on to those questions. And at the final of this 3-part series, which is April the 20th, I will answer any unanswered questions. All right, so as I mentioned a few minutes ago, since not all of the people watching are therapists, and for those of you who are or in the education field or students, isn't it a fact, and write in if you don't agree, that for most human beings, a main goal of life is happiness? Don't we all want to feel maximum amount of happiness, given realistically that in life, it's highly likely that we will experience some loss and suffering. But we want to maximize happiness. And yet, I ask each one of you, how many of us resist doing things that we know, if we do them and persist, can bring greater happiness into our lives and reduce suffering? Yeah, some reason I want to sing a song. Resistance. I just met a schnook called Resistance. Albert Ellis used to sing rational humorous songs. I don't know how humorous that was. I think it's humorous that I'm singing. But anyway, I won't give up my day job. Please reflect on that now. Yeah? Do you resist doing what could make your life better, happier, healthier, more productive? With awareness, we have greater choice about making a more vigorous, concerted effort to do what would bring greater joy and happiness. And, possible reasons that many of us do resist doing what we know in our heads would be helpful. Procrastination. And one of the reasons that many of us procrastinate may be perfectionism. I don't think I can do it perfectly well, and if I can't do it perfectly well, why bother? What's the use? Many people have that attitude. Or low frustration tolerance. It's too hard, or, it's COVID, yeah, I couldn't be bothered, maybe next year, maybe next month. And because instead of focusing on how much better our lives will be if we make changes, we're just very blinkered in our focus, and in the short term we don't want to deprive ourselves of what's easier. Or there's a fear of failing. What if I try and I'm not successful, or I'm not successful soon enough at achieving my goal? Or some people, I've read some writers in our field talk about people having a fear of succeeding. I'm a little skeptical about that. I think it's more likely that people may have a fear of succeeding and then failing and then relapsing. So it could be that, or a lack of persistence. Or some people may just have convinced themselves it's hopeless and, talk in other such self-defeating ways, or think, I'm this age, I should have changed by now, and because I haven't, it's too late, it's awful, it's hopeless. Or some people tried and then relapsed and just don't want to try again. So I mention that for two reasons. One, to give each of us an opportunity to reflect on whether we are resisting doing what would be really good for us in the bigger picture and even in the shorter picture, right? But it's a segue to one of the tendencies that can make therapy or giving therapy to clients more difficult, when the clients are very resistant to changing in beneficial ways for those and any other reasons. So let's just reconsider something that I mentioned in an earlier presentation for Seton Hall. What is the role of a therapist? And as I'm describing each of the features, for those of you who aren't therapists, you could consider how they can apply to you. How, if you are aware you're going through a difficult time, even though you're not a professional therapist, might you be able and willing to adopt some of what therapists commonly do to help yourself? But anyway, now I'm going to focus on the role of therapists, which includes developing rapport with a client, but not the client being dependent or feeling dependent on the therapist. That there's a connection there that enables a client to open up to his or her benefit. However, over time, that the therapist guides and encourages and teaches the client. By the way, some of you who are therapists or medical doctors refer to the people you work with as patients. Some of you use the word client. So those words are interchangeable. So if you hear me use one word and prefer the other, just hear the other in your head. Okay. Another role of an effective REBT therapist is that they'll do some research into the culture or religion of a client, if it's one that they're not familiar with, in order to serve developing greater rapport, so that they have some informed questions they can ask, some perhaps greater empathy. They can use language that's more respectful of, let's say you're working with an Orthodox religious person, and being a little more colourful might put them off. On the other hand, working with another person who has exhibited kind of creative flair in their use of language, it can increase rapport to use kind of their sort of language. So anyway, learning as much as is relevant and appropriate about the culture and so forth that your client, patient may be from or may observe. Very important for the therapist to examine their own thinking and particularly look for any irrational beliefs that they might hold towards any element of their client or clients. And if they notice any unhealthy criticism of any element connected with their client, to work on, heal thyself. And in REBT, as those of you who have attended previous presentations or who know in other ways about REBT, unconditional acceptance is a vital and recommended element. So to work on unconditional other acceptance of the client or any tendencies of the client that the therapist doesn't prefer. Clearly show interest and care of the client. With REBT, the therapist acts rather as an active directive teacher. When appropriate, the therapist will collaborate with the client in terms of, well, what do you think would be useful homework for you to do this week? And often the client patient will come up with really good suggestions. If you as a therapist can think of something the client hasn't mentioned, then it's of course highly appropriate that you would suggest that and hear whether your client is willing to try that. So encourages the appropriate and healthy and effective therapist looks for things to encourage authentically and not made up, but actively encourages small steps, baby steps, big steps, anything that they can identify that's encouraging for the client to help motivate them to keep making effort. The effective therapist stays alert to new video materials that they can suggest to the client, that the client can read or observe, that reinforces the work they're doing on themselves. Of course, the effective REBT therapist encourages the client or patient to keep learning and reading about not only REBT, but other life-enhancing materials. In REBT therapeutic sessions, the effective therapist challenges the client's irrational beliefs, not the client. And there is a distinction. The next very important element in REBT therapy is that it usually focuses primarily on the here and now. Now, in early sessions, it can be relevant to learn about earlier parts of the client's life, not like psychoanalysis to spend a lot of time there, but it can be informative in terms of exposing where a client might have learnt some of their irrational, dysfunctional beliefs. But as time moves on over the course of therapy, whether it's 6 sessions, 12 sessions or more, the focus is primarily on the here and now and thereabouts. And finally, when and where possible, the effective therapist encourages and guides the client, patient to learn and be willing to be their best friend, their own best friend, and client, if you want to use it that way. Now, in REBT therapy, the role of the client who wants to progress and create a better life for themselves mentally, emotionally, and pragmatically would include learning the basic principles of REBT. And the effective REBT therapist will use a language the client can relate to. If your client or patient is an academic, then one can use more intellectual sounding language. If not, then to speak simply and to recommend the appropriate books. Albert Ellis, books on REBT. There are 85 published books and countless others where he's written chapters, and a few where I, in collaboration with my late husband, wrote chapters, and second edition of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy book published by APA that I completed a couple of years ago. And so know the REBT books and which are appropriate to recommend. The role of the client is not only to come and sit there tushed down in a session, but to apply what's talked about and learnt, and to make effort to do homework activities between sessions, to be willing to make ongoing effort, to be willing to make the effort to develop greater unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional life acceptance. And by the way, for those of you who are listening to this and haven't listened to any of the previous Seton Hall presentations or know little about REBT, there is a link to a previous REBT presentation I did live that is on the registration form that you would have filled in. And in that I go over the basics of REBT. So you may want to look at that. Finally, the role of the client, and it's important the therapist helps the client patient do this, is to have realistic expectations, to not expect miraculous change overnight. Now, if it happens, fabulous, but even that will require ongoing effort to maintain. But in all probability, particularly with long-standing unhealthy behaviours and emotions and thinking, it will take a while to change them. Biologically, if one puts in the effort, neuroplasticity informs us, there will be change, but it will take ongoing effort. So back to the topic of tonight. Those clients or patients who aren't willing to do those things are often the most difficult ones to help. When that's the case, it's really advised that the therapist doesn't give up, practice unconditional other acceptance, and persists, and does what he or she can to motivate, encourage. All right. Now, I want to mention a few additional challenges the practitioners can face. And one very common one is burnout. Burnout, stress, illness, when we therapists push to help others to work, whenever we're called on, despite and including times where we may not be feeling really well, or when we're requiring some rest. And it's important, I'm not suggesting that we don't push ourselves at time when, I'm not in the mood, but once we get going, we can fulfill our role. But times where we recognize that we really aren't doing too well, that we are on the verge of already in burnout. And it's really important to self-care and self-nurture. If not, otherwise we get ill, or we can even resent our clients and patients. That's not advisable. If any therapist is feeling resentment for a client, it's really important that they speak to a mentor, supervisor, talk it out, heal it, change it, develop unconditional other acceptance. But sometimes it's exhaustion and not even that much a criticism of the client or the patient. So heal or heal thyself and reach out for help, therapists, if one recognizes that is an issue. It's not only important for our own well-being, but frankly, it's an example of us practicing what we preach, so that we're not being hypocritical and advising an exhausted client, exhausted from their work, whatever it may be, and you're suggesting things and yet you're not practicing them. So we can be healthy models, healthy in ourselves, and inspiration for those people who may also be on the verge of burnout. Another challenge that therapists, again, be they psychotherapists, social workers, teachers, others, face can be unmotivated clients who are not doing the work. They're not doing the homework activities. Often such clients or patients can include court-mandated people who are coming because they have to. The court has said you got to. Or they're there because the boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, mother, father said you got to do therapy, but they're not in it because they're really wanting to change. And so when that's the case, it's really important for the effective therapist to do the best we can to motivate them, to not ignore if we notice that they are expressing no interest whatsoever in participating, and to express in a non-judgmental way, look, it seems to me you're not too thrilled to be here, and more about that in a little while, about how to talk to an unmotivated person. Someone has their mic on. But accept the fact, you could say to them, you are here, not for the rest of your life. How can we make the most of it? Tell me how you think I can be of help for you, or how this can, and sometimes that can help. Really get their involvement in, let's make the most of this time since it appears you don't really want to be here. Really important that if they're not making progress, the effective therapist practices unconditional self-acceptance, that they don't think, what's wrong with me? I should have been able to fix them. You know, it's important to evaluate, how am I doing? Talk with a supervisor or mentor. Of course, keep doing the best one can at that time. But if there's no progress, not to take responsibility for that, because it does take two to tango, and mainly it takes the client or patient to make the effort. So unconditional self-acceptance, and as I mentioned already, to have unconditional other acceptance for the non-compliant client or patient. All right, so now let's go back to resistant clients and put the magnifying glass on that, because that can be one of the more challenging things. As I mentioned, self-resistance when we want to progress as individuals, but in therapy. And so what are some of the common forms of resistance or contributors of resistance, in addition to what I just mentioned about being mandated? If a client makes assumptions about a therapist, thinks that the therapist is either too critical of them, or rather arrogant, or doesn't really understand them, or if the therapist seems to be of a different culture or background to the client, they may have some assumptions and judgments. So a client-patient can be distracted if they're making assumptions, whether they may be accurate or not, about the therapist. Secondly, if they have the irrational belief, it's just too hard for me to change, or the irrational belief, if I try and I fail, it would be awful, or the irrational belief, I shouldn't have to change. You know, my spouse, my partner, my boss, they should change. It's a luck, right? Low frustration tolerance, which I briefly mentioned earlier, where one just wants change to happen really quickly and can't stand it if it takes longer than they think it should to make beneficial change. Another reason can be extreme shame and fear of disclosure, fear that the therapist will judge them if they do disclose. Pessimism, you know, tendency to the default to hopelessness. It's a habit, believing no hope it'll ever change because it hasn't all this time. Where's the evidence it ever will? There's just, what's the use? Some clients actually feel unworthy of changing. If they're racked with guilt about perhaps bad things that they may have done in the past, they may be self-punishing and think they don't deserve to be happy, that they should be guilty and they should feel depressed. And they keep themselves down. Another reason or contributor to resistance may be perfectionism and grandiosity. You know, as I mentioned before, if I can't perfectly overcome whatever, then why even bother? Huh? There can also be rebelliousness and reactance. There might be transference, and the therapist reminds them of a certain figure of their present or past life, and they don't want to be advised. So it's a kind of immature reactivity. There could be hidden agendas. For example, going back to a client or patient who's there because mummy brought them and they have to, or the partner or whatever. And they might want to get back at the person who forced them to go to therapy by not making progress. One example, like not even just emotional or cognitive progress, but let's say the issue is a person is overweight, grossly overweight, and a loved one said, you have to do therapy. And so REBT, of course, has behavioral techniques that could help. And so some clients or patients may want to get back at whoever forced them to come to therapy by not making progress. It happens. Now, another reason is that some clients or patients may be slow learners. They may have biological and neurological limitations. It's really important that a therapist be aware if that's the case and demonstrate extra patience and unconditional other acceptance. But that can be a reason for resistance, and the client in that instance might feel, I'm not up for this, I'm not smart enough, what's the use? Another reason or contributor could be, and this relates to something I said earlier, resistance to what the client or patient perceives as the views or moral tendencies a therapist might have. For example, let's say a client comes in with 1 billion piercings. I exaggerate. And the therapist hopefully would preferably have no judgment at all, and if initially they did, the effective therapist would work on putting that opinion away by noticing any irrational belief, challenging it, and unconditionally other accepting that client. So but in all probability, an effective therapist would not be judging a client for their appearance, and yet if the client thinks the therapist is, that can contribute, of course, to resistance. There could be a lack of chemistry, you know, just as in non-therapeutic life. Sometimes you click with people and other times it's more difficult to create a rapport. There could be environmental or cultural factors that stand in the way. For example, let's say a client, this is hypothetical. Hi, Andy.
Just wanted to let you know that it's 6:40.
Oh, gosh, time flies. Thank you so much. Thank you. So a few more minutes to finish up my talking here, and then we'll see about the demonstration of the video. So if, let's say, someone is new to the United States and they come from a culture where you don't get therapy, and yet they're here in the USA, and for whatever reason they're in group therapy, whatever, but they may have this idea that therapy is for sick people, so they might resist. So what does an effective therapist do? First of all, self-monitor. To increase rapport, be less forceful, be a little more passive at times. Dispute one's own irrational beliefs, as I mentioned, as well as continuing to help a client-patient learn how to do so. Collaborate wherever possible in terms of what you're going to do in the session and the homework activities. Constantly encourage, constantly affirm. Ask them why they resist and have a conversation about that. Welcome them to tell you. Then at times it can be appropriate to disclose, to have selective personal disclosure. If it's authentic, such as, look, I remember, if this is true, having this situation where an authority figure was telling me blah, 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 and I felt even more annoyed than you're telling me you feel, you could be saying to the client. And I learned later that really that person was not coming from that place, and it really was my judgment. Can I explore this with you? What might you be telling yourself about me? And encourage looking at that. What else? Experiment. In past presentations, I went over the many possible REBT techniques. So if one isn't working for a client, suggest some others. The next thing, if a client seems to make progress and then backslides, normalize it. Normalize it, say it's very common, and then encourage pick up, start again. There's a song like that. I'm not going to torture you. I'm not going to sing it. All right, just a very few more things. I mentioned one of the obstacles may be if a client is of a different culture and there's a discomfort, let's say, with their newer culture that they're living in. And so 3 main beliefs that REBT would like to see many people who are suffering unhealthy emotions because of unhealthy thinking with regard to that would include encouraging such clients to tell themselves something like, I might prefer or wish to follow the rules of my original culture and even those of my new culture, but I never absolutistically have to insist that I do so. Or secondly, I prefer and wish that others would treat me and my cultural goals fairly and considerately and with respect. But they never have to, and I can stand it if they don't, even though I don't like it. And finally, I prefer and wish that conflicts not exist between my minority culture and my majority culture, in a sense in which I now reside. But if they do exist, I can handle it. I can stand it and make a choice, instance by instance, on which rules or tenets that I will adopt or follow. Finally, in clients or patients who don't resist, just to highlight the difference between more difficult clients in terms of difficult to work with and help themselves to progress, and those who have success. In non-resistors, so to speak, there's a sense of necessity within them, not absolutistic, but they want to get better. And they realize that if I want to improve, it will require me to make effort and make changes. They are willing to experience some challenges in the process of changing old habits. They're willing to increase their awareness of what they're telling themselves that creates unhealthy emotions. They're willing to confront the problem and not avoid it. They're willing to remind themselves of realistically optimistic beliefs that give them hope when times are tough and challenging. And when things seem too hard, they're willing to reach out for support. Okay, so before I invite either a volunteer for a demonstration or we look at the video, I want to go over the workshop goals for tonight's or today's presentation, just to hopefully give you an opportunity to clarify that we've covered them all. And if not, please send in questions. I hope that it's now clear to you the role of the therapist and the role of the client in REBT therapy, that you understand some common challenges that therapists and REBT practitioners face, that you have an understanding of elements of both resistant and non-resistant clients, and that you understand some of the helpful things that can be done when working with difficult or resistant clients. Okay, so now, is there someone who would be willing not to role play, please, not to role play, but who would be willing to courageously bring up a real issue, difficulty that you're dealing with right now, for me to do a quick REBT demonstration? We'll wait just a few moments. I understand it can be daunting, especially with many attendees. And if there isn't, or maybe there is, if there isn't, we will go on to look at the video. Last session of this sort of advanced three-part Seton Hall series, there was someone who, it was not a one-to-one demonstration in terms of someone bringing up an issue. It was more of an example of supervising, and you can get the link to that if you are interested. So is there a volunteer? Because if not, I think it's time to show the video. Dr. Simon, do we have any volunteers?
Nobody's entering anything in the chat. Can somebody just put your hand up or enter something in the chat if you're willing to engage for the demonstration? And it doesn't look like somebody's willing to do it tonight, so perhaps we should go to your video.
Yes, so this video was done at Seton Hall University, BC, before COVID. And one of the main issues was anticipatory grief. But it's an example, in a way, the delightful, and if you're watching this, I thank you, the delightful volunteer wasn't actively intending to be resistant, but it's an example of sometimes the effective therapist is required to patiently peel layers, use intuition, observe nonverbal cues, and do the best one can. That's all I'll say for now, so let's watch the video and then I'll make a few comments at the end. Just volunteer, talk about whatever issues. Please take a seat. Thank you. This here, is that okay? But I guess the tech people will let us know if that's near enough, far enough. Okay. Is there... What's the time, please? 11:56. Is there someone who could let me know when it's, say, 12 minutes after? Yes, you tell me who you are, where you are, or just yell? It's great, thank you. Actually, let's say 12:15. 12:15, yeah, let your alarms sing out in unison. Okay. So, and I'll be right with you what's your name? Sandy. Thank you, Sandy. So when I'm talking to Sandy, Sandy's going to get my attention. I request that you keep as quiet as possible, including shuffling paper and all, because it's just easier for us not to get distracted. And at the end of our time together, there'll be an opportunity again to ask questions and so forth. Please observe and listen. Rational, or shall I say irrational beliefs. Oh, would you like to take the mic? Would that be better? Okay. Irrational beliefs aren't always obvious at first. Not everyone does us the favour of saying, I should always and he should never. Sometimes it's implicit. And it's also very helpful to listen to what may be behind the words that are being spoken, and also to observe body language, nonverbal, and all of that. So please observe with me. Please no talking or shuffling of potato chips or anything, and just focus on us for the next 15, 20 minutes. Sandy, thank you for volunteering. Yeah, you might need to talk a little. And let us know, Sean, will you, if it's not loud enough, Sandy, or it's good? Okay. So, Sandy, first of all, can you tell me, and it's like you and me, we forget about them. Mm-hmm. What are you feeling right now?
Nervous. This is completely out of my comfort zone, but I'm happy to volunteer.
It's great that you did. Where do you feel your nervousness?
I'm just a little nervous.
And what do you think you're telling yourself to make yourself nervous?
That I've never done this before, but, open to try something new.
Okay. Sandy, what you just said is a fact. I've never done this before. That alone, I suspect, isn't enough to make you nervous. Because some people would come up and, I've never done this before, and they wouldn't be nervous. So what might you be adding to that to create the, shall we call it anxiety, nervousness?
Just the fact that that I might be able to share personal information and, struggles.
Right. Because if you share personal information, then what is it about that creates your anxiety?
I'm not sure.
What might it be? What might it be?
No, just to be, able to share personal information with, people I don't know, or.
Because what could happen that would give credence to your anxiety? If you share personal stuff, people you don't know, then
Maybe judgment.
they might judge you. Yeah. As what?
I'm not sure.
What might it be?
I'm not really sure. Maybe, just the fact to share something with people I don't know, but I'm not sure what would, I'm not sure why.
So if I was like, I'm real nervous now, I'm feeling anxious, because I've never done this with you, and people are watching me. What do you think I'd be telling myself to make myself nervous?
Maybe something negative about yourself. Maybe
Like
I'm not
what?
good at this, or I don't know if I'll do it right, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty right, that, I should do it right or else they'll judge me, and I probably would be thinking, and that would be awful. I couldn't stand it because I want everyone to think well of me. And if they don't, behind the is, it means I'm not good enough and worthless. So that might be what would make me nervous and anxious if I were. Can you relate to any of that?
Sure. I guess I didn't think about the details, but or the depth.
Guess what? We're going to look at
Yes.
details. Hello.
Sure.
And again, thanks for your willingness. So it matters to you what strangers think of you.
Usually.
Uh-huh. Where does that get you?
I'm not sure.
Does it help you?
No.
So if it doesn't help you, what does it do?
I think negative thinking that, I need to do good all the time or put more effort into doing better, something like that.
Because if you don't, then
then it's just negative thinking that maybe you're not good enough or you're not doing.
that you're not good enough. You're talking about you now. Uh-huh. And if you're not good enough, then
Not sure. I'm not sure. Then it's just it's
think
a
you
negative trait.
yeah, but
Right.
negative is very general. Do you mind if I'm assertive like this with
Sure,
you?
no problem.
Yeah. So I have a hypothesis from what you say, and tell me if I'm wrong. I could be. That you believe Sandy, need to be good enough all the time.
Usually I feel that I have to do my best all the time.
Because if you don't,
Then I feel that I should have and I could have done better and I didn't put enough effort, and that next time I should do things better.
because if I don't do what I should, then
Maybe yes, I'm supposed to maybe reach something and didn't reach that goal or didn't come to that because I didn't do better.
And when you don't do as well as you thought you should, how do you feel about yourself?
Disappointed, but but I'm learning to to get over it and then just do better next time.
Okay. All right. If we can just hold somewhere in our awareness the possibility that you're demanding that you do your best may not be as helpful as you wanting to. And the result of demanding might lead to some nervousness or anxiety. It's just a hypothesis for you to consider. So what issue do you want to bring up?
Well, I have so much going on right now, so I figured, volunteer and not losing anything. But I have, my sister is very sick, So my whole family's going through so much right now. And it's hard to, I guess even, thinking rationally that things happen when it's someone very close to you.
Sorry to hear that.
Okay.
What emotion are you experiencing, Sandy, about your sister's illness?
I think right now, you mean, or just generally?
Well, right now.
I think mostly fear, and sometimes anger. I think a lot of fear.
Fear is the main one. Are you feeling that now? Where do you feel it? Yeah. Yeah. May I ask what the illness is? If you're not comfortable disclosing, it's fine. But
Cancer.
prognosis?
Not good.
Sometimes doctors can be wrong, and sometimes they can be right.
It's okay.
So, how can I help you?
I think that sometimes I try to, I guess, have different roles, like take on different roles in the family. So maybe be, act as a therapist to my mom, my sister, but then not really taking care of myself. So, putting myself on the side to try to think, how I can take care of the situation and everything that's going on right now, but not really taking care of myself and my emotions at all.
And where is that getting you?
I think sometimes I feel that, I don't know, like in a corner, like I'm just trying to fix everything, but I'm not opening up at all, emotionally.
Opening up meaning?
Like analyzing how I feel and something like that. Or just, thinking how, I guess, how should I?
Should? How would it be good that?
How to handle it emotionally. But, thinking about everything that's going, it's hard to, I guess, think anything positive out of it.
Okay, so I'm thinking of how to best use our time. It's a heavy and dramatic situation. There's no doubt about it. And it is very sad. And if you came up saying you want to feel less sad, I might try to discuss with you the fact that life does contain loss and suffering. And if we don't accept that, then we can create those inner corner emotions. So is there a part of your thinking that's not accepting the reality of what's going on? I'm trying to do some detective work to clarify the debilitating emotion that you want to change and the actions that would help you. That's why I'm asking all these questions. So what do you think you're telling yourself to... You've told me different things, that there's fear, there's anger, and at times you feel in a corner and you don't know what you should be feeling. Can you clarify for me what you think is most valuable for you, for us to look at right now?
I think definitely the fear is a major one. Fear, anxiety.
Fear and
about
anxiety.
the future.
Yeah, okay. So Sandy, What are you telling yourself to make yourself feel that fear and anxiety?
And I don't know what's going to happen, questioning the future.
Can we pause there? Who knows what's going to happen? Questioning the future, meaning
just not knowing what's going to, that life unfolds. And I guess I'm learning that it's not always how you expect it. So,
yeah. Do you know anyone who's got a crystal ball that can show us what's going to happen? Neither do I. Darn. So you don't know what will be. Who knows what will be? Yeah. What else might you be telling yourself or thinking or believing to make yourself feel so anxious?
I guess sometimes I think of all the different scenarios that might happen. If this happens, then
Tell me specifically, what are the worst case scenarios?
worst case would be losing my sister. And then sometimes I think about that and how life will look then after. And then I worry about my mom, about, my family.
Obviously, you're very loving, very caring, very sensitive. Sometimes miracles happen. So where there's life, there's hope. You've shared with me, and thank you for your trust, that the prognosis isn't good. So unless things change, may I be very straightforward? It sounds from what you tell me, that what's your sister's name?
Sally. Yeah.
That Sally might pass on before you do. That seems to be a reality. Do you know of anyone else whose brother or sister at a young age has died before them? Yeah. And how are they coping?
Coping, I think, after some time, it gets a little easier and better.
So do you think if Sally passes, way before we want her to, that you would find a way to cope? Really?
I think, when you're forced and you're in that position.
No one will force you. It will be your choice. You can sink into depression. But please hear me. You'll have a choice. And you don't have to.
Yeah.
If Sally passes before you and your mum and others in your family, it will be a huge loss. And in all probability, there'll be grief and you'll miss her because you love her. Are you and your mum going to live forever?
No.
So each one of us has our time, yeah? Although it sounds like Sally's might be really way too soon. Have you heard of other parents who've lost children who cope? Yeah.
Yes.
Think it's possible your mum will?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if the worst case scenario happens and she passes, tell me a realistic way in the light of just the context of we're all going to die. And a lot of us lose people way too young. My cousin, who was like a little brother, died when he was 21. So I'm feeling it with you. I mean, I can't imagine the depth of yours, but I have a sense. So in the light of that, Sandy, tell me how you might think about this probable reality. May it be years away, but we don't know. By the way, may it not happen. The Martians might come and kidnap us all. You know, we don't know anything other than what's right now. Tell me a different way that's authentic, not what you think I want to hear. I don't want to hear that. Is there a different way you can consider the situation with beautiful Sally?
I think that's why when and I did lose a friend, when I was younger in college, and I think that it happens, and it's something that is not rare, or like in life it happens. I think it's just hard when it's someone that's very close to you, thinking, I can't believe it's happening to me.
It is happening to you. So
Right.
what can you tell yourself, Sandy, to help yourself?
That everything will be okay.
Can we be more specific? Everything will be okay? I don't know if everything will be okay. Tell me what will be okay. I hope everything will be okay, but there's no guarantee. But some things have a high probability of being okay. Tell me what they are, Sandy.
I do tell myself that no matter what happens, that it will be okay, because life will go on and you learn ways to cope with it.
Talk about yourself. I can learn ways.
And I can learn ways to cope with it. Just, and I do look at other people that have lost people in their lives, and you just learn ways to cope with it, and life just goes on.
We choose to let it go on. But it can go on and we can be miserable, or we can be less miserable a lot of the time. What at this point do you want your choice to be?
Definitely to overcome, if that does occur, the worst scenario, and to live life fully, and to
Tell me 3 things that will contribute to you living life fully after Sally goes.
understanding that nothing is in your power to change, or in my power to,
Nothing?
not nothing. Some things are not in your power to change. So accepting that, and changing my thinking to just be more positive now and in the future.
So tell me something positive. About Sally, when it happens, not being with you. Tell me some specific positive things that you might tell yourself.
I can't think of anything positive of that.
If I just lost I don't have a sister. If I had a sister and she just died, and I said, Sandy, tell me, what can I think to get myself out of this depression? What can I do? Sandy, what would you tell me?
To live life to the fullest.
How?
Because I think just it would be an experience learning that, like I said, some things are not in your control. So I think it will just be an experience to make you stronger, to understand that in life, some things happen that are just not in your control.
And what are some nice things I can do to help me get through that raw early period of grief? What would you tell a client?
To just go through the process of grief.
It's very general, Sandy. Tell me an activity. Suggest an activity.
I would say to engage in something that you like. Just
Activity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good suggestion. Tell me some activities you like, Sandy.
Writing.
What?
Writing.
Writing?
And,
Could express the depth and the color of your emotions. You could express your journey. What else? What other activities do you like?
Just being outdoors and exploring.
Do you think nature will still exist?
Yes.
Would be there and welcome you?
Yes.
If you welcome it. So what I'm wanting you to do is to consider, in order to dilute a recurring idea that I don't know what's going to happen after Sally dies. So having sought some specific suggestions, might that be helpful?
Yes.
What are some things you could do in the chapter you're in now, every day, that could enhance your time with Sally and your mother and yourself? What can you do more of that would be positive?
I think just spending quality time.
Do you?
No, I don't believe it's enough.
Okay. Is that in your power to change?
Not really. But
May I be bold and say I don't agree? If you make it a priority. Now, tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong.
no, I think that's true.
Because I've been with dying people I adore, and I made it a priority, and I still was able to work, and I still was able to meditate. That was my self-care at the time. Yeah. So I believe with an intelligent, bright woman like you, if you make a conscious decision, even though it seemingly hasn't been your habit till now, you could choose to adopt more self-care. You indicated before you're neglecting yourself, and you said at times you feel fear, at times you feel angry. I'd be pissed off if I neglected myself as much as it seems you do. So that might help with that. And then it seems you might be overwhelming yourself if you share with, like, there's this. If you are not making quality time, do you think there's a way of prioritizing things?
Yes.
Tell me, give me some details. I like details.
I think that sometimes, I do avoid spending a lot of time because I don't want to experience those negative emotions when I'm just
Okay, but what creates the negative emotions?
thinking that.
Yeah, what if I said to you, Sandy, what if I said to you, you may not see Sally anymore, you can go to her funeral? What would you say? Would you want to spend time with her?
Yes. Sure.
And can you change the negative emotions you've felt till now that have you hesitate? By telling yourself what?
That I want to spend more time without those negative emotions, just focusing on actually spending quality time with her.
Then unhealthy negative emotions come from what you're telling yourself. And if it's stuff like, how will I live without her? I can't stand that she's suffering. This is awful. I can understand why you would want to avoid that. But if you tell yourself, she's not comfortable, but she's happy that I'm with her, find funny things to do with her. Draw, write, see funny movies. Get her to be creative. If you stop telling yourself, I can't stand what is, when it is. People die all the time. So if you're there because you ignored this nutcase who said you can't see her till she dies, and you want to, and you find things to do with her, do you think you might feel fewer dreading negative emotions and just cherish every moment? Hopefully lots of them till the day might come. I think so too. You know the word fun? I mean, it's kind of, you have an opportunity now to have real quality time, ironically with Sally, that you might not have had if she had lived beyond you.
Right.
You can make quality time now. What a gift. And with your mum. Bring her in. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good.
What do you feel when you think about doing that?
Feels good. Feels that I don't feel, that fear. It's
So it's
not
a
there.
possibility. Allow yourself to feel excited about that. I know a lot of people who have brothers or sisters and they don't argue, but they don't make quality time. They're so busy. And you know what? It might be, later than when Sally dies, but one will die and the other person is, I wish I'd spent more quality time. Guess what? You got a chance. How lucky are you, given the misfortune of her ill health? That's life, you get a gift and you get a challenge. And you were talking about when you think of accepting it, you feel better. Yeah.
Yes.
So about the anger, feeling in a corner, what quality things do you intend to do, if any, going forward from this moment?
I think if I replace, thinking, or feeling angry or upset, I think if I replace those positive thoughts.
What activities, self-care activities?
Same, I would just engage in more something that makes me feel better.
I'm sorry if I sound a bit rushing, it's because of time.
Right.
May I suggest priority, quality time? Then time outdoors and write your feelings. You told me those are things you like. Would that be useful?
Yes, definitely.
And then in your own words, when you're with beloved Sally, what attitude?
To just really spend quality time, happy time.
How will you think differently so you don't create the dread, the fear that has been preventing you from being with her more? What can you tell yourself?
I like what you said about having a chance now, and some people don't have that chance.
A lot of people. Oh, a lot of people. Yeah. What are you feeling right now?
More relaxed.
More relaxed, does that mean less nervous? Are you feeling nervous or anxious? Why do you think that is?
Just, I think because I was able to share.
Oh, I think it's more than just sharing. What else?
Trust.
Well, when you sat here, you told me you felt nervous, you felt anxious. we uncovered a little bit about the potential need for people not to judge you, but we don't have time to look at that, but work on that. And then this very sad situation of Sally's declining health, but we don't know. There may be a miraculous cure and there may not be. But we talked about what you can do to not neglect yourself and to have quality time with her, right? So what in our conversation so far might be contributing to you not feeling anxious and you feeling more calm and relaxed?
I think a different perspective and just
Specifically, tell me specifically.
Having a
Forgive me for
plan.
being pushy. You know where I'm coming from.
Yes.
I want the best for you in the short time we have.
Yes.
So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not demanding,
Yes, yes.
but I want you to really get as clear as possible. So tell me specifics if you would.
I think I feel a little better that maybe I have a plan moving forward and just, different thinking.
Can I tell you what I think might be contributing? And tell me if I'm wrong. I don't need to be right. I want to be helpful. I don't need to be right. I think maybe you feel more calm because you have some hope that some good times are ahead and some belief that it may not be as much of a hell when she goes as you weren't even letting yourself think about. When we look at what we're afraid of, sometimes we see not that it's okay, it's not so okay, but that it's part of life and we can cope and still have a meaningful life. Yeah. Any comments or questions for me?
No, I see how, sometimes you just have to think differently and analyze how you're thinking and just looking from a different perspective.
You don't have to, but if you don't, you'll suffer for the rest of your life. That's a good idea. What are you feeling right now?
Relaxed.
You look more relaxed. What are you feeling there?
Nothing.
Don't go anywhere. Is 20 minutes up? How long? Am I deaf? I didn't hear. 12:34. I didn't hear.
Nobody wanted to interrupt.
Yeah.
People care. So in 34 minutes.
Wow, it's a long time.
Is that what it was? You transformed fear, nervousness, and anxiety into relaxation. I didn't do it. I didn't do it for you. You did that. Sandy, do you see the power that you've got to create how you feel?
Definitely.
And by the way, you're a therapist?
I'm a school psychologist.
Do you see how the more you work on yourself, potentially the more effective you can be, although my hunch is you're beautifully effective. Your care, your kindness comes through, which is why it's really important to prevent burnout. And quality time with your loved ones, time outdoors, writing, and whatever else. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So, gosh, we're right on the dot of finishing. I hope you found that valuable. Actually, it really looked at some of the elements that I had talked about earlier. Not that Sandy was actively resistant, but it took a little while. And I hope that you noticed some of the REBT strategies that I was applying. There was some psychoeducation in there.
I dealt with what I had. I first looked at the anxiety she was feeling in that moment about being on the stage and people judging her. And then after we spent some time hopefully reducing that, I asked for permission to be assertive. Now, if I had any indication from her she didn't want me to be so pushy, I wouldn't have been. But she gave me permission and I went for it, and as it turns out, to her benefit. So I worked on clarifying the goal. It took some time, but we got to the priority goal. There was some collaborating going on. I did some reverse role playing. When she couldn't find it too easy to come up with an answer, what would you tell me in that situation? I asked her to be specific in terms of thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors. So I don't know the status of Sally or Sandy or their mother, but hoping for the best. Everyone, we're out of time for Q&A. I'm sorry. Please send them in to Dr. Simon, and I hope you'll attend on the 20th of April, and I will answer as best as I can all of those questions. Please, every day, remember what you can be grateful for, no matter what the challenges, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joffe Ellis, and for everyone participating tonight. We hope you'll join us again at our final session for the spring in a couple of weeks, and we will absolutely make time for Q&A during that presentation. We wish you well until then. Bye-bye.